The sun was slowly rising over the golden grasslands of South Africa. Warm light touched every blade of grass, every tree, every stone. The wild was waking up, zebras stretching their legs, birds flying in flocks, and small animals looking for food. But among all of them, the most powerful presence in this part of the land belonged to a lioness named Nala. She was not an ordinary lioness. Nala was strong, smart, and respected. Other animals gave her space when she walked. She had earned this place in the wild, not just by her power but through survival, patience, and leadership. She led a pride, a group of lions, that depended on her for hunting, protection, and guidance. By her side was a huge lion named Toka. His golden mane moved with the wind, and his eyes were sharp like blades. He was the champion of the pride. For many years he had fought off rival lions who tried to take over. He had scared away hyenas, protected the cubs, and walked proudly next to Nala like a true king. He wasn't just strong, he was brave, clever, and loyal. Nala trusted him with everything. They were not just mates, they were partners. Every day they moved through the land together, keeping the pride safe. Their cubs played in the sun, their sisters hunted, and the land stayed peaceful. This was their home, their kingdom. But outside this paradise, danger was growing. Not all threats in the wild had teeth or claws. Some walked on two legs, wore boots, and carried weapons. Poachers. These were humans who did not come to study or protect animals. They came to kill and make money. Lion bones, especially from strong males like Toka, were sold in illegal markets. Toka's beautiful mane, his massive body, it made him a target. And though the area was part of a protected wildlife reserve, fences could be cut, guards could be avoided, and sometimes animals disappeared without a sound. Caleb, a young ranger, knew this very well. Caleb had grown up near the park. Since childhood, he had loved animals. But as he got older, he also learned about the dangers they faced, especially from poachers. He decided to become a wildlife ranger and work in the park to help protect the animals. Every day he checked the cameras, walked the fence lines, and looked for signs of intruders. He had never had a direct run-in with poachers before, but he knew it was only a matter of time. One late afternoon, Caleb was returning from a long patrol. He parked his Jeep under a tree, took out his binoculars, and looked across the plains. In the distance he saw the pride. They were resting peacefully, Nala lying under the shade, cubs playing nearby, and Toka sitting tall, watching over everyone. It was a perfect moment. Caleb smiled. He respected Toka. He had watched him for years through camera traps and field notes. Toka had survived so many fights, always protecting his pride. Caleb admired him like a silent hero of the wild. That night, something changed. The moon was high, the sky was clear, but deep in the park, shadows moved quietly. 3 men dressed in dark clothes, carrying rifles with silencers, crawled under a broken part of the fence. They had planned this for weeks. They had seen Toka from far away. They knew his pattern, his movements. They also knew the value of his body. The poachers moved fast. They followed the pride's scent. Their footsteps were silent. Their eyes were cold. They didn't see lions as living beings. They only saw money. Suddenly a shot cracked through the night. Then another, and another. Caleb woke up with a jolt. His radio buzzed. A hidden camera near the pride's usual sleeping spot had picked up loud noises and flashes. Gunfire. His heart pounded. He grabbed his flashlight, his rifle, and jumped into the Jeep. He drove fast, his headlights cutting through the darkness. Dust flew in the air. The wheels bounced over rocks. In his mind, one thought screamed louder than everything else: please don't let it be Toka. As he neared the location, he turned off the engine and stepped out quietly. In the distance, he saw movement, figures running away into the dark. He raised his rifle but didn't shoot. They were gone, disappearing like rats. Then he turned and saw a shape lying on the ground. He ran forward, It was Toka. Blood soaked the earth around him. His body had been ripped open by bullets. One leg was nearly torn off. His breathing was slow, painful. His eyes were half closed. But he was alive. Caleb dropped to his knees beside him. He whispered, "I'm sorry, boy. I'm so sorry." He didn't know what else to say. He had never felt this helpless. He pressed a cloth against one of the wounds, knowing it wouldn't help much. Toka's body was too damaged. It was only a matter of time. Suddenly, a growl echoed nearby. Caleb looked up, and there she was. Nala stood a few meters away, her eyes glowing in the moonlight. Her muscles were tight, her breath heavy. She had seen it all, from the shadows, from the tall grass. She had seen her mate fall, not to another lion, not to nature, but to humans. To a gun. Her ears flicked back, her teeth slightly bared. Caleb stayed still. He didn't raise his weapon. He didn't move. He knew one wrong step could be his last. But Nala didn't attack. She didn't run either. She just stood there, watching, her champion dying, her world changing. Caleb slowly stood up. He took a step back. His radio crackled again, this time with voices. Backup rangers arriving. Lights in the distance. Trucks. Help. But none of it would bring Toka back. In his final breath, the great lion gave a small growl, soft, almost like a whisper. Then he was gone. Nala didn't cry. Lions don't cry. But she didn't leave his body. She sat beside it as the sun began to rise, while the rangers took notes and searched for tracks. Caleb gave orders, but his voice was hollow. He couldn't stop thinking about the look in Nala's eyes. She didn't hate him, but she didn't forgive him either. And somehow, deep inside, he knew. His life had just changed too. He had seen many things in the wild. But this was different. This was personal. What he didn't know was that for Nala, the human who had come in the night wasn't just another threat. He had ended her mate's suffering. And in the strange, silent language between wild and man, that meant something. Something big. Something that would grow. And this was only the beginning. After Toka's death, the land felt different. It was still the same grassland, the same tall trees, same breeze flowing through the savanna, and the same stars lighting the sky at night. But something was missing now. Something powerful. Something proud. Toka had not just been a lion. He was the protector of his pride, the heart of Nala's world, the father of her cubs. His absence was like a heavy silence over the land. And Nala, she had changed. She didn't roar anymore. She didn't play with her cubs like she used to. She didn't rest under the shade of the old fig tree where she and Toka had always slept together. Instead, she moved quietly, always alert, always watching. She walked around the pride slowly, not looking for food but looking for something else. Danger, shadows, humans. Since the night of Toka's death, Nala had developed a strange behavior. She would sniff the air, track scents of tires, walk near the fences, something she had never done before. Her instincts were sharp, and now they were locked on one thing, the world of men. Meanwhile, Caleb was trying to forget the night that haunted him. He had seen many injured animals during his time as a ranger. Trapped antelopes, sick elephants, even dead cheetahs. But nothing had hit him like Toka's final breath. Caleb had grown up watching that lion from afar, always amazed by his strength and calm power. Losing Toka felt like losing a part of the wild itself. And worse, he had been too late. The poachers had escaped. The police were investigating, but catching poachers in the deep wilderness was like chasing shadows. They moved fast, left no names, no addresses, only blood. Caleb stayed awake at night sometimes thinking about that moment. The sound of the gunshots, the red soil soaked with blood, and Nala standing there, eyes locked on him. Not attacking. Not running, just watching. In the days that followed, Caleb increased his patrols. He barely rested. He worked with other rangers to repair the broken fences. They installed better cameras and placed traps, not to hurt animals, but to alert them of human footsteps. He marked dangerous zones and tried to track the poacher's escape path. But the forest gave few answers. The pride was restless too. Without Toka, a male lion's absence meant danger. Rival males could appear and try to take over. The cubs could be killed. Lion society was harsh. Only the strongest survived. But, strangely, no rival had shown up yet. It was as if the news hadn't spread, or maybe fate was giving Nala time. Every few days, Caleb drove out near the area where Toka had died. He didn't know why. He just felt like he had to. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was duty. Maybe it was something else. One afternoon, he stopped his jeep near a small hill and stepped out. The sky was turning orange and the shadows were growing longer. As he walked toward the tree line, he felt like something was watching him. He paused. He looked around. And then he saw her. Nala. She was standing behind a tall bush, partly hidden, but clearly visible if you looked hard enough. Her eyes were wide open. Her body wasn't tense like a lion about to attack, but she wasn't relaxed either. She was testing him, studying him. Caleb slowly stepped back toward his jeep, never turning his back to her. He got in, started the engine, and drove away. But something inside him had shifted. The lioness had not run. She had not growled. She had simply watched. Over the next week, it happened again, and again. Caleb started seeing Nala more often. Always, from a distance, always quiet. She never came too close, but never left the area either. Sometimes she sat on a rock and watched the road he drove on. Sometimes she stood with her cubs half hidden behind her. Other rangers noticed it too. They joked, "Looks like she's keeping an eye on you, Caleb." He didn't laugh. One evening, Caleb left fresh meat near a rock close to the pride's territory. It wasn't park policy to feed wild animals. They had to survive on their own. But this wasn't about feeding. This was about peace. Trust. The next morning, the meat was gone. No signs of a fight. Just paw prints. Large ones. Hers. Caleb smiled, for the first time in days. But the danger hadn't gone away. One night, while checking motion sensor cameras, Caleb saw something alarming. Two blurry figures near the far end of the reserve, close to where the pride now rested. He zoomed in. The quality was poor, but the body language was clear. Men. With guns. He called for backup and sped toward the location. But when they arrived, the men were gone. Only fresh boot prints remained in the soil. Nala must have sensed them too. When Caleb checked the area the next day, he found claw marks on trees. Lion warning signs. She had marked the land, her land, again. But Caleb knew it wouldn't be enough. Poachers were like ghosts. They disappeared and returned when least expected. And if they came back for Nala or her cubs, it would be another tragedy. That's when Caleb made a decision. He submitted a request to set up a small mobile outpost near the pride's territory. A simple wooden watch station with a solar-powered radio and a sleeping cot. It wasn't fancy, but it would give him eyes on the land at all hours. The park officials agreed. Just for a few weeks, they said, until the poaching threat passes. Caleb moved into the outpost the next day. From there, he could see the tall grasslands where the lions walked. At night, he could hear them roar in the distance. And slowly, as the days passed, Nala began to come closer. Once she even walked within 50 feet of his hut. She looked at him, then turned away and walked on. No fear, no hurry. Caleb began writing about it in his journal. She's watching me again. Doesn't look angry. Just alert. Like she's waiting for something. One early morning, he heard soft growls nearby. He stepped out, binoculars in hand, and saw Nala moving through the grass. Behind her were 3 small cubs, walking slowly, nervously. She was leading them somewhere. To his shock, she led them toward the base of the small, rocky hill, barely 100 feet from his station. She sat there while the cubs sniffed around, played in the dirt, then lay down to rest. Nala didn't look at Caleb. But she didn't stop him from watching either. It was a silent message. She trusted him. At least a little. And Caleb knew. She had no reason to. Her mate had died by human hands, and yet she kept coming back to the place where one man had stood beside her dying champion, not to hunt, not to harm, but to help. That was something wild. Animals almost never did. Forgive. But Nala, in her silent, powerful way, had made a choice. She was still wild, still dangerous. But she had seen something different in that human, something rare. And maybe, just maybe, the man who had failed to save her champion was the one who could now save what remained. Many days had passed since Toka died, but the memory was still fresh. The night of the gunshots, the blood on the ground, the pain in Nala's eyes, Caleb could not forget it. Even in his sleep, those pictures came back. He would wake up at night, breathing fast, remembering how helpless he felt. Nala had changed since then. Caleb could see it. She was no longer the same lioness who walked proudly beside Toka. She had become quiet, careful, and a little different. Her power was still there, but now it had a shadow of sadness. She moved like someone who had lost a part of herself. Caleb understood that feeling. He felt like he had lost something too, but there was something new between them. It was not friendship. It was not trust. It was something in the middle, something strange, but strong. Caleb stayed at the mobile outpost near the Pride's land. Every morning he would walk around the area, check the cameras, look for footprints, and write down what he saw. Every night, he would sit on the wooden porch of the small hut and listen. Lions roared in the distance. Hyenas laughed far away. The wind carried the smell of grass, dust, and animals, and sometimes Nala came near. She never came too close. She stayed far enough to stay safe. But she never hid from him. She would stand in the grass and look at him. Caleb would sit still. No camera, no talking, no movement, just watching each other. One evening, something strange happened. Caleb was walking along the fence, fixing a loose wire, when he heard a deep, low growl. He froze. He turned slowly and saw Nala standing behind a small bush. Her eyes were fixed on something behind him. He looked back. A black mamba, a deadly snake, was slithering near his feet. Caleb stepped back fast. Too fast. He fell and scraped his arm. The snake turned toward him, ready to strike. Before he could even move, Nala leapt forward from the grass. She didn't touch the snake, but her growl and fast movement scared it away. The snake disappeared into the bush. Caleb sat up. Shocked, he looked at Nala. She didn't growl at him. She just stood there, calm, almost like she was checking if he was okay. Then she turned and walked away. Caleb sat there for a long time thinking, why had she done that? Why did a wild lioness help a human? He remembered how he had knelt beside Toka during his last moments. Maybe Nala remembered that too. Maybe in her heart she had seen that this human was not like the others. Over the next few weeks, something more began to change. Nala started bringing her cubs closer to the station. She didn't leave them near Caleb, but she let them play near the rocky hill, where she could see both her cubs and the human at the same time. For lions, this was a big deal. Lions don't trust easily, especially not after what Nala had seen. But somehow she had made a silent decision. Caleb was not a threat. And Caleb? He made a decision too. He began using his skills and knowledge to protect the Pride more directly. He placed special scent markers around their area, natural smells, that warned other lions to stay away. He also placed hidden motion sensors that would send alerts if poachers or strangers came near. And every evening he sat near the Pride's area to make sure they were okay. He never fed them. He never touched them. He never tried to act like their friend. He respected the space between man and beast. But he stayed close, always watching, always ready. One morning while checking the camera traps, Caleb saw something that made his heart stop. A picture of a new lion, a big one, a male, with dark brown fur and a deep scar across his nose. This lion was not from the pride, he was a stranger, and that meant trouble. When a new male comes into a lion territory, it usually ends in a fight. If the new lion wins, he kills the cubs, so the females go into heat again. Then he becomes the new leader. But Nala's cubs were still young. They couldn't fight, and Nala couldn't defeat a male that size alone. Caleb had to think fast. He informed the senior rangers and they agreed to monitor the situation closely. But they could not interfere directly. This was nature's law. They were only allowed to protect from human danger, not from natural fights. That night, Caleb didn't sleep. He sat outside holding his flashlight and binoculars, listening, waiting. The next morning, he saw the stranger lion near the hill. But something unexpected happened. Nala did not attack him. She stood in front of her cubs, strong and proud, but didn't fight. She made deep, low growls, warning him. The new lion walked closer, looked at the cubs, then looked at Nala, and then he turned and walked away. Caleb didn't understand at first, but later, when he watched the footage again and again, he noticed something strange. The new lion had a slight limp. Maybe he had been in a fight already. Maybe he didn't want to risk another one, or maybe he had smelled the human scent near the pride, the scent of boots, the scent of the watch station, the strange smell of danger that was not natural. Whatever. The reason the stranger left, and Nala and her cubs were safe. Caleb breathed a deep sigh of relief. He realized something that day. The line between wild and human was still there, but it was not sharp. It was blurry. It was soft. And in some strange way, it was changing. The wild was watching him, and maybe, just maybe, it had accepted him. Caleb continued his routine, watching, writing, recording, protecting. Sometimes Nala would sit on the rock and look at him for hours. She didn't roar. She didn't growl. She just watched. And Caleb watched back. No words. No promises. Just a silent bond between two very different lives, connected by one terrible night, one shared pain, and one strange understanding. She had seen a human split her champion in half, and now she saw that same human guarding her world. Maybe that's why she didn't chase him away. Maybe that's why she allowed him to stay. Not as a friend, not as an enemy, but as something in between. Something wild. Something real. And something that neither of them could fully explain. The days grew warmer. The grass turned dry and golden. It was the start of the hot season, and the animals were moving more carefully now. Water was low in some parts of the land. The wind was hot during the day and cool at night. It was during this time that something strange started happening again. Nala had changed again. She was acting nervous, more than before. She would walk around in circles, sniff the air again and again, and make soft, growling sounds. Her cubs stayed close to her side all the time now. She didn't let them play far. She moved them from one place to another more often, always choosing thick bushes or quiet corners to hide them. Caleb noticed the change quickly. He watched her carefully through his binoculars and camera traps. He had seen Nala calm, angry, sad, and even brave. But now she looked worried. Not afraid like before, but alert, like danger was near. One evening, just before sunset, Caleb saw something that made his heart beat faster. He was sitting outside his small wooden hut, drinking water and writing in his notebook. Suddenly, his radio made a sharp beep. A motion alert. He checked the signal. The alert was from the same area where Toka had died. He jumped up, grabbed his binoculars and flashlight, and drove fast toward the place. When he reached, he stopped the jeep and turned off the engine. The world was silent. The only sound was the wind blowing through the dry leaves. Then he saw it. Boot prints. Fresh ones. And not just one set. 3 different sets. 3 men had walked through that area recently, and not long ago. Poachers. Caleb looked around carefully. He didn't want to make noise. He took pictures of the footprints and sent a message to the other rangers. Possible threat near Pride's zone. Need backup ASAP. But backup was far away. He was alone for now. He decided to hide and wait. For hours he sat behind a bush, watching, listening. Nothing happened. The sky turned dark, stars appeared, and the night animals began to sing, but the poachers never showed themselves. Maybe they had already gone, or maybe they were still hiding. He returned to the hut just before dawn. He was tired, but his mind was full of worry. If they were back, they could attack any day. This time, Nala and her cubs could be in real danger. He had to do something. Caleb talked to the park officials. They agreed to send more help to the area. Extra patrols, more cameras, drones if needed. But all that would take time. Maybe 2 or 3 days. He didn't have that kind of time. So he made a bold choice. He would stay outside. Not in the hut. He would set up a tent near the Pride's usual area. Not too close to scare the lions, but close enough to act if anything happened. He packed his sleeping bag, his torch, his water, and his radio, and moved into the wild. He knew the risks. Lions, snakes, hyenas, and of course poachers with guns. But he didn't care. He had made a promise to himself. No more failures. Not again. He set up his camp under a large tree near a small waterhole. The ground was dry, but the place was high enough to give him a wide view of the land. Every evening he watched the sun go down behind the trees, and every night he listened to the sounds of the wild. Lions roaring, elephants walking, jackals howling, and sometimes a soft growl. Nala. She knew he was there. She had seen him. She never came too close, but sometimes, late at night, Caleb saw her eyes glowing in the dark, watching him from the bushes. One night something happened. It was around midnight. Caleb was half asleep inside his tent when he heard a soft rustling sound, then a whisper, then a footstep. Not an animal. A human. His heart jumped. He grabbed his torch and his radio. He stepped out quietly and turned off his tent light. Then, in the distance, he saw them, 3 men, walking slowly, holding guns. He turned on his radio and whispered, "Poachers confirmed, 3 men, moving west. I'm near the Pride. Request immediate support." Then he turned off the radio. He didn't want them to hear. The men were getting closer. Caleb crouched behind a tree and waited. They moved past his camp, walking toward the rocks where Nala and her cubs had been resting last evening. He couldn't wait for backup. If they found her, they could kill her. He had to stop them, but he had no gun, no weapon, just his flashlight and his courage. He decided to do something risky. He picked up a rock and threw it far to the left. The sound made the poachers stop. They turned and pointed their lights toward the noise. Then Caleb stood up just for 1 second and flashed his torch toward them, a bright white light. He shouted, "Rangers, drop your guns." It was a lie, but it worked. The men panicked. One ran. Another dropped his bag and ran behind him. The third turned and shot toward the light, but Caleb was already on the ground, hiding. Within 5 minutes, the poachers were gone. The forest was quiet again, but Caleb was still lying on the ground, his heart beating fast. Then he heard something behind him, a low, deep sound. He turned slowly. Nala. She was standing there, only 10 feet away. Her eyes were shining in the moonlight. Behind her, the cubs were hiding. She had come to protect her family, and maybe to protect him. She looked at him. He looked at her. Both had risked their lives that night. The human and the lioness, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as guardians of something more, something wild, something worth saving. The next morning, the rangers found Caleb's tent, the footprints, the bullet hole in the tree, and the poacher's dropped bag. It had tools, meat, and animal parts. Proof. The officials said Caleb was lucky to be alive. But Caleb didn't think of luck. He thought of Nayla. He thought of her eyes in the dark, watching him, not as prey, but as something else. A few days later, Caleb visited the place where Toka had died. He placed a small stone on the ground, a marker, a memory. Then he walked back to his camp. As he walked, he saw Nala on a rock with her cubs. She stood up, watched him for a moment, then lay down again. She didn't run. She didn't growl. She had accepted him, maybe not as a friend, but as someone who had proved himself. And Caleb knew in that moment that his life had changed forever. Not because of the danger, not because of the job, but because of a lioness who had seen him at his worst and still allowed him to stay. The sky was turning pink as the sun rose over the African plains. A soft breeze moved the tall, dry grass. Birds began singing, and the world slowly woke up. It had been 2 weeks since Caleb had faced the poachers alone in the night. Since then, everything had changed, not just around him but inside him too. The pride was safe. Nala and her cubs were alive. The poachers had been tracked down by the rangers using the footprints and the bag they had left behind. 2 men were caught, and 1 was still missing. But Caleb knew he would be found. The land had eyes, and justice, slow as it was, had started moving. But something else had happened, something deeper, more powerful. Nala no longer saw him as a stranger. She saw him now. One morning, Caleb stepped out of his tent and walked toward the rocky area near the small water hole. It was the place Nala liked to rest. As he walked slowly, quietly, he saw her sitting under a tree. The cubs were playing nearby. She didn't run. She didn't stand up. She just looked at him calmly. He sat down on the ground, not too close, but not too far either. For a long time they both sat there in silence, the wild and the human, both still, both watching. Then one of the cubs came closer. Caleb didn't move. He just watched the tiny paws walk toward him. The cub sniffed the air, tilted its head, then ran back to Nayla. She didn't stop it. She didn't growl. Caleb smiled. It was a moment he would never forget. He had entered their world, not fully, not forever, but just enough. That afternoon, Caleb wrote a long message to the Wildlife Authority. He requested that the area where Nala's pride lived be marked as a safe observation zone, a place where the pride could stay protected, where no hunting or building would be allowed. He added maps, reports, photos, everything he had, collected for the past 6 months. He ended the letter with one sentence. We owe it to her. He meant Nala, and he meant Toka. Caleb knew this land was not his. It never would be. But he could be its voice, its protector. A few days later, he got a reply. Request accepted. Official protection process will begin within the month. Caleb felt peace in his chest, something he had not felt for a long time. But life in the wild was not only about peace, it was also about tests. One morning, Caleb saw something strange in the sky. Smoke. Black smoke. Coming from the west side of the park. He quickly grabbed his radio. Fire spotted, Sector 9, sending coordinates now. The rangers responded fast. But it was a dry season. Fires could spread fast, very fast. Caleb knew Nala's pride was near that area. Without thinking, he jumped into his jeep and drove straight toward the smoke. The wind was strong, pushing the fire across the land quickly. Flames were burning trees and bushes, and animals were running. Zebras, antelope, birds, even snakes. Caleb drove through the smoke and heat, coughing, his eyes burning. He reached the ridge where he had last seen the pride. But they weren't there. He got out and ran through the grass, shouting, Nala, Nala. Of course, no lion would answer a human's voice. But he called anyway. Suddenly, he heard a sound. A roar. Not far. He turned and ran toward it. There, under a rock ledge, was Nala. Her cubs were behind her. The flames were not far now. The fire was coming. Caleb looked at her and she looked back. No time, No fear, just trust. Caleb opened the back of his Jeep and waved toward her. Come on, come this way. Of course, lions don't follow human instructions. But something happened. Nala didn't run. She looked at her cubs, growled a deep signal, then turned and began running, away from the fire, toward the open land. The cubs followed. Caleb jumped back into the Jeep and drove beside them slowly, carefully leading them away from the smoke. For nearly 2 kilometers they ran together. The fire behind them, the land in front. A lioness. Her cubs, and the human, who had once been her enemy. Finally, they reached a green patch where the fire could not touch. The rangers were already there, fighting the fire from the other side. Caleb stopped the Jeep, got out, and watched as Nala and her cubs slowed down and rested under a tree. She turned one last time and looked at him. Their eyes met. He didn't smile this time. He only nodded, and she blinked, slowly, like a quiet, "Thank you." After that day, something changed forever. Caleb left his tent and moved into the main conservation center. He was now the lead field officer for the Nala Zone, as the team had started calling it. Rangers respected him. Scientists visited often to study the pride. And Caleb made sure none of them came too close. No touching, no feeding, no fake bonding, just learning from a distance. Respect. From time to time, Caleb would still walk alone, into the bush. He would sit near the old rocky hill and wait. Sometimes Nala appeared. Sometimes she didn't, but every time he sat there he felt the same thing. Connection, not ownership, not control, but connection. The wild had accepted him, not because he forced it, but because he earned it. One evening, many months later, Caleb sat on the hill watching the sun go down. The sky was orange and gold with streaks of red clouds. Birds flew across the horizon. A cool wind touched his face. He felt movement behind him. He turned slowly. Nala. She walked quietly to the edge of the hill and sat beside him, not too close, but close enough to feel real. She had grown older, stronger. Her cubs were now young lions, almost full size. The circle of life had continued. Caleb looked at her and whispered, "You saved me more than I saved you." She blinked again, the same slow blink from the night of the fire. He closed his eyes. In that moment, he saw it all again. Toka falling, blood on the ground, her roar of grief, his tears, the cubs, the snake, the poachers, the bullet in the tree, the fire, the run and now this piece. He opened his eyes. She was gone. Just like that, like a shadow returning to the wild. But he didn't feel sad, because he knew. Somewhere out there she was watching. And he would keep watching too, because now he owed her everything, not because of a favor, not because of guilt, but because in this strange, wild, beautiful world, a lioness and a man had crossed the line between fear and trust, and something true had grown in that space. Something rare, something real.